Power is the ability to do or act. We all have it, but what one thing do we neglect or avoid that keeps us from being able to apply that power to our lives? Stay tuned to Distinctions for Life, and I'll tell you. When I first read this distinction, it just kind of blew my mind. We spend way too much time making excuses. What's the opposite of an excuse? It's taking responsibility. When we take responsibility, we gain the power to do or act. When we take responsibility, we say, we're going to make something happen. We're going to change if change is what's necessary. We're going to fix it when there are problems. We're going to have responsibility. And when we have responsibility for something, we have much more control over it. And our actions have a much greater impact. So the key is to take responsibility. A few months back, I was in Las Vegas with some buddies of mine, and I was telling them about this take responsibility thing I had learned. And one of them is a director at a Fortune 500 company, and I told him that, and he goes, you know, that is so true. I find so many people who just won't take responsibility. Now, you know, he says they'll come to him and they'll say, you know, I want a promotion. And he'll say, well, if you'll learn this, and you'll learn this, and you'll learn this, I'll give you a promotion. But then he has other people who say, hey, I'm going to go learn this, I'm going to go learn that, and I'm going to go learn this other thing. And guess what? When time comes to give out a promotion, he gives it to the people who have already taken responsibility for their own growth, taken responsibility for becoming a better employee. And those are the people who get the promotions. The people who he tells what to do often don't even do it, and they don't get the promotion either because they didn't take responsibility. They weren't willing to act. So that was one example of taking responsibility and how it makes a difference even as an employee. On this same trip, I have another buddy, and we were kind of giving him a hard time because the people from back in Houston were calling him and that he works with, and they were calling him to fix things. And we were like, dude, we're on vacation, stop taking phone calls. But I had just read this, and finally I said, you know what? Matter of fact, I think I was reading the book while we were there. I said, look, dude, I'm not giving you any more hassle about getting calls from back home. Because you know what? You're taking responsibility. And as a result, that means you're having to do things. But it also means that he is the man, the one who is most important to his partnership. They couldn't function without him because he has taken responsibility for all number of things. He is the one who's created this business from the ground up. And while everybody's an equal partner, he's the one who has the most power because he's taken the most responsibility. So taking on responsibility also makes you the most important person in the circle of people who are working on something. So once again, that gives you more power to act. That gives you more power of influence. So that's another reason to take responsibility for things. Taking responsibility applies to relationships as well. If you take responsibility for the relationship going well, then you have much more power to act in that relationship. Now, it may be accurate to blame the other person, but that doesn't give you any control. If you're just blaming the other person, then nothing's going to change because you've said it's all got to be done by the other person. But if you take responsibility, if you say, I'm going to make this the best relationship it can possibly be, well then you've got the ability to act. You've got the ability to change things that need to be changed, that you can change. You've got the ability to act and do things that need to be done. And you have the ability to fix things when they break. So even in relationships, taking responsibility helps the process and makes things better. Lastly, we should all take responsibility in communication. You know, if you're talking to someone and they're not getting it, you can say, man, that person's an idiot. I'm explaining it as clearly as day. Why don't they get it? Or you can say, okay, I'm responsible for making sure that he's understanding what I'm saying. So now I'm going to take responsibility for it. I'm going to go get feedback. I'm going to change the way I'm saying things. I'm not just going to keep repeating it. I'm not going to say it louder because saying it louder doesn't help people to understand it better. I'm going to take responsibility for this communication and make sure that it's going to happen. So that's another example of taking responsibility. Finally, a minor disclaimer. Just because you take responsibility for something doesn't mean that you control the outcome. Okay, you can only take responsibility for things that you can take responsibility for. For instance, you can't decide, I'm going to take responsibility for the next presidential election, and because I've taken responsibility for it, I'm going to pick the next president. It doesn't work that way. But I'll tell you this, if you do take responsibility for the next presidential election, and you do all you can, you're going to make a whole lot more impact on the outcome of that election than you would if you took no responsibility at all. Here's your action step. Ask yourself, what things am I making excuses for right now? Whatever those things are that you're making excuses for, that's probably somewhere you need to take some responsibility and gain some control. And then you can take action and make a change in those things. So that's your action step for today. Ask yourself what you're making excuses for and choose to take action and to take responsibility. This distinction came from Dan Kennedy's No BS Guide to Wealth Attraction, which includes a lot of different distinctions in it. The Take Responsibility chapter is one of them that you all should read. You can find a link to that book on our website in the show notes for this episode. So today you learned that taking responsibility gives you incredible power in your life. So take responsibility, and until next time, I'm your host, Ron Davis. Live life to the fullest.